Continuing on from where last video left off, I've now spent a fair amount of time making new equipment and repurposing some of the old. I underestimated how long it would take for all of these different pieces of equipment to look good together in different combinations. Since I can't know in which order players will upgrade their characters, I've used similar colors so that there's at least a cohesive look throughout the armor sets. However, a consequence of this is that it all looks kind of bland and samey, and all the tunics aren't really what you think of when you think of gladiators, so I'm pretty sure that I will redo it all later. But before I continue working on the new career mode upgrade system, I want to add two-handed weapons, since that will add more variety to the gladiator classes that I'm creating. First, I'll quickly edit a one-handed sword and turn it into a temporary two-handed sword. Then I'm going to have to remake all of the animations. I'm gonna save myself some time by just slightly editing the one-handed animations to make it fit with two-handed weapons. There's really not a lot of different ways that you can make attack animations in 2D anyway, so I think this is acceptable. In a comment on the last devlog, Jesse asked if I could expand on how I draw the armor. It's mostly just a trial and error process, but I have this mannequin character that I draw on, which obviously makes things a lot easier. I generally don't follow any specific palette, instead I just choose colors that I think look good, and at this point I've got so much equipment that I mostly just sample from other sprites. Especially when there's a common material, like leather in this case, that is used a lot in the game. So once the basics have been drawn, I continue through trial and error as mentioned, and what I try to do is just to make the pixel art more or less match the image that I have in my head of the piece of equipment. In this case, I'm trying to find a way to emphasize the creases in the armor and give some depth to it, but I end up adding metal studs to it instead so that it doesn't look as plain as it was at the beginning. Sometimes I try it out with another piece of equipment, and here I got the idea to add a pixel on either side to certain parts of the armor to give it more depth instead. And finally, to add detail, I play around with highlights and shadows kind of randomly, but especially around the metal studs, I'm trying to make it look like there's some drop shadow or dents or whatever in the leather. This is a fairly boring piece of armor, and I think it's gonna end up as a low to mid tier medium armor in the game. But anyway, now I'm gonna go ahead and create a bunch of new equipment because there's still a lot missing. A few days have now passed, and this whole equipment situation is turning out to be a real pain. I've almost completely remade what I showed at the start of the video, but I've also made some new stuff as well as sorted the old equipment into light, medium and heavy armor. But this is far from over, and unsurprisingly this update will take a lot longer to finish than I predicted. But I've now made 7 classes and I've started trying to balance everything, which as you can see is still a work in progress. The last thing I want to do is to add something that indicates how many upgrades are left in each category. And I think the simplest thing is just to do that with numbers. I also need to display the price of each item as well, but I'll work more later on making it look nicer and easier to understand what's going on. Over the coming weeks I will slowly finish this update, but I don't think there's gonna be any more devlogs on it since there's not much interesting for me left to show. So I will most likely move on to making devlogs or videos about other games. Anyways, thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.